Okay, hello and welcome back. So a few weeks ago, I was called in by a member of the public, or I was asked rather, why politicians in the region read the land acknowledgement verbatim and we're not giving any meaning to it and connecting ourselves to it, and how we are implicated in colonization, and how then we must be responsible also for our own decolonization journeys. And so I thought about situating myself in relation to our land acknowledgement, and I thought then about maybe talking about my family's immigration history on my dad's side, or on my mom's side, her parents having immigrated here, and how I'm connected to the land here, but then how I'm also connected to their land, and how they are connected to their land, which I've seen when we've gone back to their homes. And I was going to go in depth in that, but I decided just to mention that that's not really what I'd want to talk about right now if I talked about myself in situation to the land, but rather I'd like to talk about this book that I read at the beginning of the summer called A History of My Brief Body by Billy Ray Belcourt, who's a queer Indigenous academic and writer, poet, essayist, and which situates me in relation to our land acknowledgement, both in my research job, but then also in my council job. And what he says in this book really struck me, given how important we find, and data collection, how important data collection is. We need research, and research helps us make decisions, but then also how data collection and research can be used to forward certain purposes while we forget others, or we don't hear others, and somehow some voices get lost in that process. And so he says about voice, I don't want my voice to be churned through a biopolitics of data collection. That is the process of racialization. I won't take part in a performance of self that entraps me in a vicious circle of proof-making. And so what that led me to was just a few questions that I will ponder this year as we're making decisions. The first being, to what end are we using this data? The second, and for whose benefit and what benefit? And then how does this data collection reinforce marginalization of groups who have been pushed down and who have been pushed out by the institutions who are collecting that data? So that's where I'm at right now with my personal and professional decolonization journey. And I think I was called in a way that made it seem like this person would encourage others to situate themselves as well with the land acknowledgement. Of course, there is no pressure to do so, and I know some of you have done so before as well. And in light of that, I will say our land in our territorial acknowledgement to do justice to the land that we are on and the work that staff have done in helping us craft this. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather today is the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Chinontan people. Chinongtan. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. In our moment of reflection, at the beginning of this council meeting, we pause to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. And now, does anyone have a disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? I need somebody to move the approval of minutes. Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. All in favor? That's everybody. And now we're on to staff reports. Funding release for transportation services, projects, and programs. There's no presentation. Does council have any questions of staff? No? Okay. Is there someone who wants to move it? Councillor Rowe? Councillor Hanmer, all in favor? It's everybody, I think, Mayor, yes? Very good. All right. And now we're on to our public meeting. There was one that was deferred. So the formal public meeting for zoning bylaw amendment application Z 2304 143 Columbia Inc. 143 Columbia Street West, Ward 6, Central Columbia, which was scheduled to occur on September 9th, 2024, has been rescheduled to a later date to be determined. This is a formal public meeting to consider item 8A, zoning bylaw amendment Z 2411, 1000646156 Ontario Limited, 18 and 20 Hickory Street West. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate register in the binder located on the desk at the rear of the council chambers. If there is more than one binder, please make sure you are signing the appropriate one. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of the meeting and the dates the notice was given?
Notice was advertised in the Waterloo Region Record on June 6, 2024, and mailed or emailed on June 4th, 2024 to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property and to public agencies. An informal public meeting was not held.
The planner, Amanda Wyszynski, thank you, will now give a brief overview of the application.
Thank you, Chair Vasic, Mayor McCabe, and members of council. Staff have received a rezoning application for the lands municipally known as 18 and 20 Hickory Street from MHPC Planning on behalf of numbered company 100646156 Ontario Limited. My presentation today will summarize the proposal and speak to my recommendations to council. The subject lands are located immediately northwest of the Hickory Street West and Spruce Street intersection. The subject lands have a total area of approximately 0.105 hectares with frontages along Hickory Street West and Spruce Street. The subject lands are currently occupied by 2 single detached dwellings. In regards to the official plan, the subject lands are designated as low-density residential and are within specific provision area 45. The low-density residential designation contemplates for building typologies such as townhouses. And then in regards to zoning, the subject lands are zoned as holding residential Northdale 6 or HRN6. Within this zone, the permitted maximum height is 21 meters and the maximum density is 250 bedrooms per hectare. The applicant is proposing to lift the holding on the site. Staff can confirm the applicant has satisfied the requirements of lifting the Northdale holding provision for the purposes of a 9-unit townhouse development. And then in regards to the proposed development, the applicant is proposing to construct 9 3-story connected townhouses with 6 townhouses fronting Spruce Street and 3 townhouses fronting Hickory Street. The development contains 9 units with a total of 26 bedrooms. Each unit will have 3 bedrooms with the exception of 1, which will contain 2 bedrooms. The applicant is proposing 9 vehicular parking spaces and 9 bicycle parking spaces. Vehicular parking is accessed from Hickory Street, and bicycle parking is located along the first unit fronting Hickory Street along the driveway. And then at the intersection of Hickory Street and Spruce Street, there will be an outdoor amenity and landscape area for residents of the development. And then in order to facilitate the proposed development, the applicant is seeking 4 site-specific zoning exemptions. 3 of the proposed amendments are technical in nature to recognize the configuration of the proposed development. And then my next few slides will explain each in detail. The first amendment relates to the minimum street line setback for a convertible frontage. This amendment is technical in nature due to staff's interpretation of building facade, which speaks to the exterior wall or face of the building abutting a front or flankage yard. Based on the residential Northdale 6 zoning, the development is required to have a minimum of 75% of the front building facade be within 5 meters of the street line for a convertible frontage. In the image on screen, you can see staff have identified the front building facade along Hickory Street in a purple dashed line. Since the units are connected, the applicant is proposing 66.2% of the front building facade be within 5 meters, with the remaining 33.8% setback approximately 11 meters. The intent of this provision, in part, is to ensure that the street line is activated and that functional site requirements such as parking, garbage storage are located interior to the site. Hickory Street will continue to be activated as each of the units have their primary entrance from the street in addition to the outdoor amenity area. And then the second amendment relates to the maximum street line setback for a neighborhood frontage. Similar to the previous provision, this amendment is technical in nature due to the townhouses being connected. The RN6 zone has a maximum street line setback for a neighborhood frontage of 6 meters. In the image on screen, you can see staff identified the setback along Spruce Street in a blue dashed line. The townhouses fronting Spruce Street meet this provision. However, the townhouses fronting Hickory Street with the exterior wall do not comply. The intent of this provision, similar to the other, is to ensure that the street line is activated and that the functional site elements are located interior to the site, such as the parking and the garbage. Spruce Street will continue to be activated as each of the units have their primary entrance from the street, and in addition to the outdoor area as well. The third amendment relates to the first story height. The RN6 zone requires a minimum first story height of 4 meters, whereas the applicant is proposing a minimum first story height of 2.7 or approximately 8 feet. The intent of the minimum first story height is to allow for mixed use buildings or convertible spaces on the ground floor. As the applicant is proposing strictly residential, a 4 meter first story height, which equates to approximately 13 feet, is not required. Staff do not object to this amendment given the small scale nature of the proposed residential townhouse development. And then the fourth and final amendment relates to the townhouses being connected. The definition of townhouse within the zoning bylaw restricts the blocks of townhouses to a maximum of 6. The intent of this regulation in part is to address massing, facilitate articulated roof lines, facilitate access to rear yards, and to increase opportunities for landscaping. The general intent of this regulation is maintained, given the design and configuration of the proposed townhouse development. From each of the streets, the development will not read as 9 connected units. Rather, it will be seen as 3 townhouse units from Hickory Street West and 6 townhouses from Spruce Street. The proposed building orientation creates an opportunity for the private outdoor amenity at the intersection, which adds to the visual divide between the 3 and 6 units. The L-shaped building allows for the screening of vehicular parking spaces from the street. Staff do not object to this amendment, given the small-scale nature of the proposed development. And then in regards to my recommendation, staff are recommending approval of Staff Report IPPW 2024-039. Staff are also recommending the approval of Zoning Bylaw Amendment Z2411 and amending Zoning Bylaw 2018-050 by removing the holding on the subject lands. Staff are also recommending the Zoning Bylaw 2018-050 is amended by adding site-specific provision C269 to the Schedule C and to Schedule C1 for the lands known as 18 and 20 Hickory Street. I'm happy to answer any questions the council may have. Thank you.
Does council have any questions of staff? Councillor Rowe.
Through you, Chair. Thank you so much, Amanda. I actually have a question for Bob Henderson, if I may. I'm wondering about traffic on that street. Hold on, let me actually get the exact question. So I'm wondering about overflow street parking and pedestrian safety crossing at Hickory and Spruce, and if there's any concerns about that. The addition of the 9 cars in that area.
Sure, it's through you, Chair, to Councillor Rowe. Staff have confirmed that the proposed parking on this site meets or exceeds the current zoning bylaw requirements, so staff have no concerns in that regard. As for the intersection operations and pedestrian safety, staff have also reviewed the intersection operation and looked for any cues of any issues with pedestrian safety, and staff are confident that the intersection is operating well in that regard.
Mayor McCabe.
Thank you. Thank you through the chair. Thank you, Amanda, for your presentation. Just a question about the first story height, the 2.7 instead of the 4. I understand that you said that this doesn't present, it's a small scale and not here, but does that set any precedents for other developments that we should maybe be aware of or thinking about, or I'm sure staff thinks of all these different angles, but I just wanted to be clear if this might set us up for something in the future that we may have to make adjustments for.
So through the chair to the mayor, so that's an excellent question. That is definitely something that staff discussed internally and with the applicant. And from what I understand is if the building height were to be raised to, let's say, 3 meters, there's building code implications, which could change the design of the site, which could change the design of the units. And then in terms of precedent, it was my professional opinion that I was comfortable with this amendment on this property because it is small scale in nature. And if another application were to come in, it would likely be in a different context. And so it would be evaluated on its own merits because there could be other amendments that kind of work in conjunction with the proposal as well.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you very much for that. And then my other question was about parking, and I'm just curious about how recent provincial legislation, like, does that impact the amount of parking that's needed in a location like this?
So through the chair to the mayor, again, another good question. So within the RN6 zone, they are required to have one parking space per dwelling unit. However, Bill 185 is now in effect, so they are within a major transit station area, so technically they are not required to have any vehicular parking. They are providing the 9 parking spaces, which would have met the requirements of the zoning bylaw if Bill 185 were not in effect.
Okay, thanks. And then my final question, if that's okay, through the chair, was just around the walkway. And I'm just concerned because, like, if this is a safety issue, because for people who are parking in the back and then, you know, maybe in the dark need to come around to the front of their building. Like, is that something through our urban design guidelines that we consider the safety issue for having to do that rather than to have a walkthrough there?
Yeah, so through Chair Vasic to the mayor, our urban designer did take a look at the application and did provide comments. He did not comment on that aspect, which made me infer that he was okay with that design. But that is also something that I took a look at, and the site is constrained in terms of like the development, and I felt it was appropriate, the layout of the site and how it was oriented, to have the parking kind of on the one side and kind of more functional elements to the rear.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Okay, seeing no other questions for staff, I'll now ask any registered delegations to come forward. You must be Mr. Hawkins. You'll have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Vasic. No presentation this evening. Amanda was kind enough to send her presentation ahead of time, and she did an excellent job going through each of the regulations that we need relief from. The ground floor height at 2.7 meters. So I think just to further answer your question, this is probably the only zone in the city where the ground floor height of a townhouse would be regulated. So if the question that you were asking was broader, if we looked at other neighborhoods in the city where a townhouse might be built, there wouldn't be a regulation that said you needed a 4-meter ground floor, for example. It's just a function of this particular zone, which was largely intended to accommodate mixed-use buildings, generally taller than this one. And this is, Joel informs me that this may be the first townhouse new development in Northdale. So it's not a product that council has seen much of since Northdale was enacted 10 plus years ago. But it is a housing type that's in demand and the missing middle type of housing. So we think it's a good fit. It sort of broadens the mix in this area. And they would be 9-foot ceilings inside on the ground floor. So it would be, you know, a typical modern townhouse that would be built in Vista Hills or East Bridge or Carriage Crossing, something like that. I think Amanda's really covered everything else. She noted that parking's not required, but parking's being provided. I think the other question about the pathway, we worked with staff in quite a fair bit of detail on this particular plan because it does not require site plan approval. It's under the new rules enacted a few years ago. A building with 10 or fewer units wouldn't require site plan approval. And we were down to sort of measuring every blade of grass to sort of something for council to think about and staff too is the landscape open space regulation used to have a definition, and then the definition got changed. And I understand the rationale behind the change was to encourage more softscaping, but one of the consequences of that was if you had pathways and hardscaping on your site, it didn't count towards your landscape open space percentage, unless it led to a planned amenity area, for example. So like on this site, there is that amenity area at the front, a pathway that goes to that counts, that's fine. But a pathway that sort of goes alongside the parking to get you out to the sidewalk on Hickory, for example, does not count. So we were very sensitive to the percentage of landscape open space, and we worked hard with Amanda to sort of get that number to an area where we thought staff supported, and we thought that council would also support. And one of the approaches was we didn't put in excessive hardscaped pathways. This will be a project where there's not going to be a whole lot of cars coming and going. It's only 9 units. So it'll be lit, so there'll be certainly space for someone to walk in that parking area, and cars will be traveling at very low speeds and very infrequently. So we didn't think it was going to be a big concern in that regard.
Councillor Rowe?
Through you, Chair. Hi, Trevor. I was just wondering, I know that the 9 bike spaces meets what's required. I wondered if there were any conversations about adding additional bike spaces, seeing as the units are 2 and 3 bedroom.
Through you, Chair Vassic, I think the expectation, and Councillor Wright and I were talking about this on the way in this evening, that the owners would more than likely bring their bikes into their units. So our expectation, just as anyone who has a ground-related house has a bike, they probably put it in their garage, or if they don't have a garage, they bring it into their unit. So we expect that the unit tenants or owners would bring it into the unit, and be more visitors that would use the outside parking.
Good point, thank you. And my other question was, and I just wanted to clarify, there are no additional tree plantings am I reading that correctly on the landscape plan?
Oh, no, there'll
There
be
are.
tree plantings.
Oh, there
Yeah,
are,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, they'll be along the boulevard, along the street.
Okay, I missed that. Okay, so here's my question. The city currently is working on an urban forestry management strategy, and something that I'm interested in is volume of soil to ensure that the trees grow to their maximum potential with maximum canopy. So while this isn't certainly anything that is written in stone, but I'm just curious if there's any possibility of discussion in terms of having maximum soil per tree, which I believe like optimum is 30 cubic meters.
Well, I can't say whether 30 cubic meters would be provided, but normally soil volumes are restricted by structures underneath the ground, so there wouldn't be any in this case. This would be, I think, if council just imagined this as a row of townhomes in a neighborhood in Waterloo. You would have the sidewalk and you'd have your front yard. There's nothing underneath the grass or the soil in the front yard. So there's no restriction in terms of anything that would impede tree planting. And same with the boulevard, unless there was infrastructure in the boulevard, there wouldn't be any limitation there either.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mayor McCabe?
Thank you. Thank you, through you, Chair, and thank you for the additional explanation. Trevor, appreciate that. Do you have a sense of how soon the builder, assuming that this gets approved, that how soon the builder may actually
I actually have their first 6 digits dialed on my phone, and when I leave here, I'll press the 7th, and they will start construction. I'm exaggerating, but in all honesty, they do wish to start moving ahead with building permits.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
because, I mean, as you can appreciate, we've approved here at the council chambers thousands of housing units for approval, and there haven't, vast majority of them haven't gone ahead, so, we're quite keen on getting some of this housing built as much as whoever's at the other end of that speed dial.
Yeah, no, and
wants to get it built.
I did ask them that question because I did think it was a question that might come up, and they do wish to move very quickly on this. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful to know. And it is, I mean, I certainly appreciate seeing a development come forward that has that is multiple bedrooms, 2 and 3 bedrooms, and not just singles with dens, so certainly appreciate that.
Any other questions for our newfound comedian here? I appreciate it. The personal growth in your humor has really, expanded over the last 6 years.
I had all summer to work on it, right? So.
Yes. Is there anyone present tonight who wishes to speak to this application? Anyone else? Super. So if there are no more delegations, this formal public meeting is concluded and the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. Does someone want to move it? Councillor Rowe?
Through you, Chair. Whereas council has considered all written and oral submissions, and whereas council has considered the professional opinions of planning staff, therefore be it resolved that council approve report IPPW 2024-039, that council approve zoning bylaw amendment Z24-11, 1000646-156 Ontario Limited for 18 and 20 Hickory Street West in accordance with Section 7 of Staff Report IPPW 2024-039.
Seconder? Mayor McCabe? Any comments, debate? All right, all in favor? Is everybody? Thanks, Amanda, Trevor. Okay, moving on. Look at this. Okay, this is a formal public meeting to consider item 8B, zoning bylaw amendment Z2303, 20 University Inc., 20 University Avenue East. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate register in the binder located on the desk at the rear of council chambers. If there is more than one binder, please make sure you are signing the appropriate one. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of the meeting and the dates notice was given?
Notice was advertised in the Waterloo Region Record on August 15th, 2024, and mailed or emailed on August 12th, 2024, to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property and to public agencies, to all persons who signed in or spoke at the informal public meeting held on March 6, 2023, and to all persons who requested further notice.
Thank you. The planner, Tristan DeVoe, will now give a brief overview of the application.
Thank you very much, Chair Vasic, Mayor McCabe, member of councils. Staff received a zoning bylaw amendment for the property municipally known as 20 University Avenue East, zoning bylaw amendment Z23-03 from the Planning Partnership on behalf of 20 University Incorporated. So the site is located on the corner of University Avenue East and Regina Street North. It was formerly a commercial site. It was a kind of a vehicle service kind of commercial site. The existing building has since been demolished and the site is currently vacant. It is approximately 3,600 square meters in size, and the applicant is proposing to construct a new mixed-use development on the subject property. Comprised of a residential tower and a mixed-use podium. The building generally is a 25-story mixed-use building on a 5-story podium. There's 260 units, one-bedroom units being proposed. The podium is a mix of ground floor commercial units, approximately 660 or 76 square meters. Along the university and on the Regina Street frontages. The podium also contains some of the residential units as well as the parking for the site. The official plan designates the site as a mixed-use community commercial. This designation supports mixed-use development and allows for a maximum height of 81 meters as well as 25 stories and a maximum density of 750 bedrooms per hectare. The proposal from the applicant is consistent with the official plan, so no official plan amendments have been proposed or are required. The zoning bylaw is mixed-use community commercial, C181. It has a holding provision which is placed on the property via site-specific exception C159, and that holding provision is one of the requests that the applicant has come is to request removing that holding provision, which is required prior to development. The zoning bylaw also similar to matches the OP, where the maximum height is 81 meters, 25 stories, maximum density 750 bedrooms per hectare, which equates to the 260 bedrooms that are being proposed. And permitted uses are a variety of commercial uses and residential within a mixed-use building, which is what the applicant is proposing. To facilitate the development, however, the applicant has requested a number of site-specific amendments. So first and foremost, or not first and foremost, first, the zoning bylaw requires a minimum tower separation from an interior lot line of 11 meters. They're proposing 10.5, excuse me, from the westerly lot line. The initial submission of this application had the building a little bit closer to Regina Street. They were asking for a reduction on the street line setback. Staff weren't in favor of that, and so as kind of going back and forth on this, one of the solutions was to pull the building back a little bit farther from Regina, maintain that 5-meter setback. But a result of that was that they lost about half a meter on that westerly property line. So there is a very minor amendment of 0.5 of a meter on that interior tower separation. In addition, the zoning bylaw requires a 3-meter step back from the tower above a podium. For the most part, the building does comply with this, but the main entrance on Regina Street is slightly recessed, and the podium recesses a little bit there. So in that small portion of the podium, it is only a 0-meter setback. Again, staff are supportive of this. It's very minor. It adds a bit of articulation to that facade, as well as creates a recessed entrance for weather protection for people using the building. The maximum tower dimension in the C181 zone is 40 meters. Given the design of the tower, the parts of the facade that face University Avenue jut out a little bit, just again adding a bit of articulation. So portions of the building do exceed this. Again, staff are supportive of this. It's not the entire width of the building that is being increased. It's just a little bit of articulation along the one facade. So we feel this is minor and are supportive. We are adding a part of the site-specific amendment for allowing 26 stories. This is more of a technicality. The building itself is a 25-story building. From the perspective of the front facade, as well as where the commercial is all located. But when you go towards further up Regina Street, the parking levels basically occupy, there's 2 parking levels that occupy the 1 story of the commercial equivalent. So from that perspective, you could consider that a 26-story building. It's so just to kind of make sure that we are complying with the zoning bylaw, we are adding the extra variance to allow 26 stories, but it is more just a technicality. Again, this is a 25-meter or 25-story building from the perspective of the front facades. It's really just because they're putting 2 levels of parking in on that ground floor. There's also a request to reduce the number of parking spaces. So the total number of parking that would be required for all uses on the site via the zoning bylaw would be 308 spaces. They are proposing 197. Given that this is a walkable area, it's just outside of a major transit station area. There's a lot of transit accessibility in this area. Staff are supportive of the reduction. And the final variance is to add some dimensions to allow stacked bicycle parking. The zoning bylaw has specific size criteria for how bicycle parking spaces are determined in order to be counted for the bicycle parking counts. And those regulations don't really allow for stacked parking to be utilized and count towards the bicycle parking requirement. So in order to allow them to use stacked bicycle parking as towards their parking counts, the site-specific amendment will add dimension criteria for stacked bicycle parking on this site. And then lastly, they are, of course, requesting to remove the holding provision. The holding provision, staff is satisfied that the applicant has met the criteria for removing the holding provision, which was receiving a record of site condition acknowledgement from the province. And so we are satisfied that condition has been met and support the lifting of the holding provision. Number of reports and studies were submitted that staff reviewed as part of this application. And in general, staff is now satisfied, and we recommend that staff report IPPW 2024-043 be approved, as well as zoning bylaw amendment Z2303 to add the site-specific exemption for the site, as well as to remove the holding provision on the site. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Tristan. Does council have questions for Tristan? Councillor Rowe.
Through you, Chair. Thank you so much, Tristan. I actually am going to go back to Bob and ask another question. I'm wondering, Bob, about the intersection of Columbia and Regina, and if that location's on your radar for monitoring or mitigating any issues with this development, or perhaps anything else that's of concern.
Thank you. Through Chair Vasic to Councillor Rowe. Thank you for the question. Staff are aware of the intersection of Columbia and Regina. Staff have identified it as an intersection that will be coming up in need of safety improvements. We do have a report coming in November as part of our network screening, traffic collisions countermeasures report coming in November, and we'll speak to possible recommendations for the intersection for improvements in safety there. But as for the development contributing to a degradation of safety at that intersection, when we looked at the traffic impact study, there's very little development-related traffic assigned to that intersection, so it would be very difficult for us to say that this development would contribute to any degradation in safety at this intersection. So it is an issue that we've identified now, but as for development-related issues, we can't say that it will impact the intersection.
Any other questions for Tristan? Mayor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. This is a question that I saw that that a resident had asked, so on behalf of that resident, in case they're watching, I just want, it made me curious though, so that's sort of two reasons why I'm asking it, but the question was around the driveway width, and why that was being widened, where we know that if the more narrow something like that is, the slower people will go. So I'm just curious, and on behalf of this resident who had asked this, they're wondering why you're recommending that happens, or why it even is needed, and what's being prioritized with that change.
Through you, Chair Vasic, to Mayor McCabe. So with the initial submission, the applicant did ask to vary the minimum driveway width. However, the zoning bylaw actually does not have a maximum driveway width for mixed-use buildings that are subject to site plan control, the rationale being that those matters are handled through site plan. So the site-specific bylaw doesn't actually have anything related to the driveway width, as it's not a regulation that needs to be varied. That being said, as part of the review and part of our commenting, discussing the actual interface where the driveway is going to meet the pedestrian realm, meet the sidewalk and enter the city right of way, is going to remain narrow at I can't remember the number off the top of my head, approximately 6 meters, and then it widens up after that. So the actual conflict point where it's going to be entering the right of way is narrow. It extends beyond that because then it splits off into two streams, basically, one to access the parking and then one to access a loading zone. But because it is kind of a parallel line, it feels like the driveway is widening. But again, at the actual interface with the city-owned right-of-way, it is narrow.
Okay, thank you very much for that explanation.
Thanks, Tristan.
Thank you.
Councillor Bodley.
Sorry, Tristan, I had a question for you, through you, Chair Vasic. My question is about the geothermal conversation from the initial informal meeting. My understanding is that was going to be pursued. We were going to review that with the region and look at whether this was an appropriate site. Obviously, the region has come back and said, no, it's not an appropriate site. There's contamination nearby, a contaminated site nearby. But I'm wondering if maybe you could add some color to how that conversation went with the region, perhaps not necessarily related to this site, but broader around the thought process around geothermal in this area broadly, if there weren't a contaminated site nearby?
Certainly. Through you, Chair Vasic, to Councillor Bodley. Yeah, so the zoning bylaw does have a general prohibition on geothermal wells for any properties west of Weaver Street. The applicant requested that this be removed as they explored the feasibility of it. And so when we get these requests, they are looked at on kind of a site-by-site basis. The region is certainly willing to pursue that if the site conditions worked. In fact, there was another application from the same applicant with a similar proposal where there weren't any site contamination issues, and the region was fine with that proposal, and that will be something that will be added to that request, and we'll be pursuing when that comes back to council. But yeah, in this case, really the only reason why it was removed was the site itself. It wouldn't work for this particular site due to contamination.
Excellent. That's a helpful clarification, so I appreciate that. As a follow-up through you, Chair Vasic, did this applicant, and I can't seem to recall, did they complete the energy study portion that we are typically asking for? And how does the geothermal decision impact what that energy study looks like, if it impacts it?
Through you, Chair Vasic, to Councillor Bodley. So I believe the energy, I don't believe there was at the time when this came in that we required a full energy study. Energy was explored through the planning justification report, and there were some talks of that. Geothermal certainly was a piece of that, and maybe I'll let the applicant speak to more specific examples, but there were other built form and building criteria that they are using for energy efficiencies.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, thanks, Tristan. Now, would any registered delegations come forward? Brandon Simon.
Good evening, members of council. Happy to be here tonight. Brandon Simon, I'm an associate with the Planning Partnership. We're the planning consultant on behalf of the applicant. I'll keep my presentation brief and maybe just try to touch on some additional questions that the council have asked. Tristan did an excellent job covering all of the zoning matters, so I'll just talk a bit more about some of the other aspects of the proposal, move through it quickly, and happy to answer any questions you might have at the end of it. Very important gateway site, north side of University Avenue, just east of King Street. This is an important hub and concentration, important higher density node that's planned in the city. Obviously, I have Wilfrid Laurier University, a concentration of higher density residential development, but also employment opportunities, commercial amenities. It's a really important node in the city. Highlighted here is where that major node has been identified, where you're seeing the permission as of right for the 25 stories is 750 bedrooms per hectare. So very important node, supported well by public transit, active transportation, as well as those institutional amenities, commercial services that I mentioned that are in proximity to the area. The site itself was previously used as an auto shop, and as you can see from the image here, essentially the entire site was occupied by the building or paved areas that were used for parking, car storage, etc. As a result of that prior use, there was some subsurface soil and groundwater contamination, and the groundwater contamination in particular is why the region was concerned and understandably took a conservative and cautious approach with regards to any potential for geothermal wells here. So we had to pivot a little bit there, but that's fine. I can kind of speak a little bit more towards the other sustainability initiatives just a little bit later on. But clearly not fully optimizing the site or leveraging the site for what's planned as an important high-density node in an important part of the city. In terms of the proposal, as Tristan mentioned, 25 stories, 260 units. I'll specifically highlight here too a very meaningful commercial component, about 7,000 square feet or so. So In a subsequent slide, I'll show how the commercial space along University Avenue occupies the entire frontage at the ground floor, as well as the majority of that Regina Street frontage. And we're really trying to create an active streetscape and an inviting environment here. So large patio spaces out front lining the streets, really trying to make this an active destination for pedestrians and cyclists coming along University Avenue or Regina Street. In terms of some of the other benefits of this proposal, I'll kind of show a little bit here. The previous use had essentially this very, very long driveway access along Regina Street that occupied over half of the frontage. So it was probably measuring like 20 or 30 meters in length. They also had a driveway access onto University Avenue. So in this proposal, we'll be consolidating that into one driveway as far from University Avenue as we could put it, really to try to prioritize that pedestrian access and public transit over vehicular access. If you've been by the site recently, you've noticed, and from Tristan's photo as well, there was some remediation work that the owner's already undertaken to get this site shovel ready. One of the plan here is to begin construction as soon as possible in 2025, or perhaps even this year, because of how we've bumped around a little bit with different planning applications here as we were collaborating with staff. There has already been a pretty thorough site plan review as well, so we're hoping to move forward very quickly. And when we got the call from Tristan that staff were satisfied with the application and would be bringing a positive staff report, the owner immediately got started on working drawings for the building permit application. So everything's in the works to get this shovel in the ground as soon as possible. So that's an important, not even goal, but it's necessary to really just to keep the pipeline of projects going and grow the applicant's already large housing portfolio. In terms of other benefits and impacts, it largely complies with city zoning, including density and height requirements. And I think the reduction in vehicle parking and the corresponding increase in bike parking, we're up to 0.7 bicycle spaces per unit, whereas 0.6 is required, really speaks to the goal here of supporting that active transportation as well as public transit. And this image shows you what that ground floor looks like with the commercial space occupying that entire University Avenue frontage, majority of the Regina Street. Here's the driveway condition at the rear of the site. So as Tristan mentioned, where you have the driveway crossing the sidewalk, it's the standard driveway width. It's only where you have this split to accommodate the loading space that it reads as a bit larger, but the benefit here is it means we only have one driveway, vehicular driveway for the whole site, whereas there is currently two, and it's as far from University Avenue as possible, as I mentioned. So I think it's a very positive outcome from a design perspective. And then here you'll see as well all of the different patio spaces that are located out front of the commercial units to really create that vibrancy. And to proactively answer a question from the previous application, all of the trees are proposed with no structures underneath either, so you have kind of clear soil conditions underneath, so soil volume is not a concern here. There isn't any underground or anything below these. These are all going to be in native soils, so no concern as well from a soil volume perspective. And as you can see, what we've tried to do is create that really prominent street tree condition along both streets, and then also provide streets or trees around the exterior of the site as well. So trying to accommodate as much landscaping as possible. I don't think I need to cover any more of the zoning bylaw details because Tristan did an excellent job of that. So I'll conclude by saying that I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. Councillor Wright?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just have a couple of questions here on this building. So just recently, Mayor McCabe was on the radio talking about student housing and noting that we were about 5,000 units short in our city, despite having the best supply of student housing in all of Canada. So you can imagine the scale of the issue. These are proposed as one-bedroom rental units. Am I correct on that?
Correct.
Okay. And there are no multi-unit units proposed in this building?
In this building, that is correct. What's designed here works for this site and allows shovels to get in the ground for this site. It also adds to the portfolio the applicant has, which includes studio units all the way through to 5-bedroom units and everything in between. So this is about kind of rounding out a piece of the puzzle of their portfolio as well as the city's broader housing portfolio. So all one-bedroom units here, but this is what works in the context of this site. And I will say that we are working on some other applications with this applicant that Councillor Rowe and Mayor McCabe are aware of that do have the mix of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units. So that's certainly something we look forward to integrate into other future projects moving forward where it's feasible to do so.
Okay, thank you for that. I just wanted clarification on that. And do you consider students to be more or less your developer's main target?
I don't know if main target, I don't know if there's a specific main target. I think these types of units also very much appeal to young professionals, people of that demographic as well, but there's no denying that the site's obviously very close to Wilfrid Laurier University as well as Conestoga College. I read the article, or I read an article that was summarizing Mayor McCabe's interview this morning, so I commend the City of Waterloo on, as you say, providing the most student housing of any city proportionally in Canada, but still having this challenge, and I think that's the unique situation that the city finds itself in, being such a hub for educational institutions. And it's a challenge. There's no doubt that this type of with the location definitely will appeal to the student population, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily the target. I think the idea is to appeal to as broad a demographic as possible to support the long-term rental use of this building.
Okay, I just have 2 follow-up questions, if that's okay. One is about extreme heat and the experience of many of our apartment dwellers in the city. Just wondering if you can speak to what sorts of materials might have been incorporated in this building or strategies to address extreme heat. And I'm talking about glass glazing, whether there's in-suite thermal controls or not, because oftentimes what happens is we get a heat wave in the shoulder season before a building is fully regulated with AC. So I'm just curious what sort of features are available in the building as proposed.
Sure, and so it'll be a central AC system, but I believe there are going to be in-unit controls. And although it doesn't directly address kind of the in-unit experience, the one thing I will note is that virtually all the heating and cooling will be done by air source heat pump here. Originally, obviously, with the geothermal, looking at the ground source heat pump approach, but the air source heat pump will do virtually all the heating and cooling here, which is obviously a very efficient situation, and also allows better, I think, to provide a mixture of both heating and cooling throughout the building, depending on individual user needs. So that's, I believe, how the different units are going to work from a climate control perspective.
Okay, thank you for that. And then lastly, is there a designated delivery space within the parking structure or anywhere around the building? I just may have missed that.
No, absolutely. So we have the designated loading space located over here on the side of the entrance driveway, which would be essentially the designated loading / delivery space. The other idea here, though, is that we really wanted the lobby to be on Regina Street because obviously University Avenue is a higher order road, very important road, artery for the city. Bike lanes west of King Street eventually coming here as well. So if there were going to be any need for someone to quickly pull over or something, we wanted that to be on Regina, essentially as far back from University Avenue as possible. But there is a designated loading space drop-off area located just off the side of the vehicular driveway.
Okay, thank you very much. That was the last of my questions.
Thanks. Councillor Rowe.
Through you, Chair. I actually don't have any questions because Councillor Wright actually asked one and the other one you answered already about the soil, so I'm good, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Other questions from council? Mayor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation tonight, and I do really appreciate and thank the developer for originally attempting to do geothermal. I know it's a bit of a challenge particularly in Waterloo with some of the regional bylaw in place, but appreciate the attempt and the fact that you're going to be using air source heat pumps for that. That's great to hear. couple of questions that I was wondering, but, well, actually, one comment, just with the bike storage, appreciate that, the stacked biking, but just something to think about is that some people are starting to use cargo, like the attachment, so it just might be something to think about when you're designing the space, because that takes up a bit extra room, but I'll leave that with you. I'm just wondering about the green space and how that works. Like, I know that you've got some around the, on the main level, and I don't know if I saw it, like, is there space, amenity space inside the building or on top of that podium?
That's correct. So there's a rooftop amenity space here as well as an indoor amenity space directly off of the outdoor amenity space. So that's on top of the podium facing University Avenue.
Okay, and then just, we have a challenge, we know, in the Northdale area with the amount of development that has gone in there, for good reason, with particularly to address a lot of the student housing need. But the green space continues to be a challenge, so, and I know we're trying to address that as well, but I don't know if you had given any additional thought to where you could find a little bit more green space, or if maybe that should have been a question to staff.
Certainly, we've tried to. We look at the site from wearing a few different hats in terms of what does it mean to try to optimize the use of this site in terms of the planned context here. So, major node, we obviously know about the height and the density permissions. I'm also cognizant of what the site looked like, which was essentially an entire paved area. So
Yeah.
I think this is a very significant improvement in terms of 18 or so new trees in the area, more landscaping. Certainly, you're not wrong that it's a very urban kind of expression in terms of its built form and its site layout. But I think at this location, that's warranted. And I think really what we wanted to focus on, knowing that this is such a prominent gateway street, was outdoor amenity to support the commercial space in terms of the patios. We very easily could have done additional trees, additional landscaping in here, but we really wanted to create a situation where these commercial units could thrive and could create that exciting, inviting environment. So that's kind of the trade-off we were looking at here. I think we've come up with a pretty good balance, which is not always easy to do, but that's kind of some of the different thoughts we had.
Right, and fair enough, it is much better than the empty parking lot that was there, so certainly take your point on that, thanks. And just similar to what I had asked the previous planner who was here, when do you anticipate, assuming that, if we give this the okay to go ahead, how quickly do you think the builder would be moving to put shovels in the ground? I know you've already referenced that there's some work already happening at the site, but as I said before, we're anxious to get some of this housing built, and we've approved lots and lots of units, and some of them haven't gone forward. So, just wondering if you could comment on that. Thank you.
Absolutely. City staff have been very, very good working with us to try to proactively get started on some of that initial work. I mentioned earlier that the site plan application has already been in, and we're down to basically just a few final issues. So I suspect we'll be getting endorsement very soon as we got the call from Tristan that everything was looking good and would get a positive staff report from staff. That's when the applicant moved forward with the remediation. So all the remediation work is done. The site's essentially shovel ready now. They've also started on the working drawings from a building permit perspective, and I understand that those should be ready and good to go in about a month's time to make the building permit submission. So if all goes well, you'll hopefully see shovels in the ground very early next year, or perhaps even earlier if we're able to get through the process at light speed. But I know that this is it's a big building, 25 stories. There's a process in place for good reason, but hopefully, as I said, you'll see shovels in the ground very early next year.
That's really great to hear, because of course we have our housing targets to meet. So thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
Of course. Thank you.
Other questions from council? I have one. Well, I have a comment, first of all. I don't know if it's anything to be proud of, and I say this in a gentle way, that it will look nicer than what's there now. It was kind of funny, but better than a piece of garbage is like not exactly something to be proud of.
Point taken.
Great.
Low bar in terms of the existing site, but I was speaking
We
more in
have some
terms of the,
aspirations,
yeah,
you know?
in terms of the landscaping, in
Sure.
terms of how much green space. But yes, point taken.
Great. I'm actually just curious about, having been part of the approval of the University Avenue Gateway strategy. I'm just curious how or if it's informing the development community in what you're doing. So did you look at it at all? Did it inform what you're doing? Or is this how you're envisioning the street activation and pedestrian activity something that kind of came through your own processes?
We certainly did look at it, and also obviously have reviewed that with city staff as we've gone through this and through the site plan application. It's interesting because I kind of think of that strategy is obviously focused on the public realm, so the public side of the right-of-way, and obviously the bike lanes and everything else is a big part of that. And what I think the challenge is marrying kind of the public and the private realms together, because they're essentially seamless, right? There's no painted line that says this is the property line, this is where you go from public to private. So what our take is from what's coming and what's been done already on University Avenue is that it's prioritizing people first and foremost, and selfishly, my favorite thing whenever I'm walking down the street and it's nice out is finding somewhere with a patio. I just think that something so vibrant about it. Whenever someone tries to show you like a city in Italy and they're like, this, why can't we have this? There are always just patios everywhere and people out and about. And so we really feel that this, and I think some of the other thing you strive for is variety, right? You don't want to have a cookie cutter situation where everything is the same. You do want a unified streetscape approach on the public realm, because that's just something that it looks complete. There's a sense of, collectivity to it. But on the private side, having a mix of different uses and private realm street activations, I think is important. So this is a unique opportunity because it's a corner site. It has large frontage on both University and Regina. So we wanted to take advantage of the unique attributes of this site and also the location, and again, really think the vibrancy that you get when you have that active commercial space out front will marry itself quite well to what's being done on University Avenue.
Thanks. It sounds like you did think a lot about it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think it sounds like we're all done with questions for you, Brandon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else present tonight who wishes to speak to this application? It looks like no. So if there are no more delegations, this formal public meeting is concluded and the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. Would anyone like, Councillor Rowe moves?
Through you, Chair, yes, I'd like to put the motion on the table. Whereas council has considered all written and oral submissions, and whereas council has considered the professional opinions of planning staff, therefore be it resolved that council approve staff report IPPW 2024-043, that council approve zoning bylaw amendment application Z23-03, 20 University Incorporated for 20 University Avenue East, in accordance with Section 7 of staff report IPPW 2024-043.
Thanks. Seconder? Councillor Roach? Comment, debate? All right, all in favor? It's everybody? Thank you, Tristan and Brandon and others. Well, all right. So we're at consideration of notice of motion given at previous meeting. There is none. And a notice of motion we have from the mayor.
Yeah, I think it's fairly self-explanatory. We don't need to discuss it tonight, but this has arisen as from the Ontario Big City Mayors Caucus. It's a campaign that they launched in early August, and that we spent a great deal of time talking with provincial cabinet ministers about at the recent AMO conference. And so I put this motion forward, and I'm also going to put one forward at the region of Waterloo, and looking for your support and endorsement of this when we discuss it next week. Thank you.
Great, thanks for the intro, Mayor. No communications or correspondence, no unfinished business. Does anyone have questions? Nope. Any new business? Councilor Wright?
The folks over in Uptown West hosted the Norman Street Neighborhood Party, which is always a very good time. So the mayor and I managed to drop by there despite the changeable weather. And I really mean changeable weather. Like it was, you were flipping on your sunglasses and taking them off and hiding under a tent while it poured. But the street was packed. And everybody was out doing their thing and enjoying each other's company. And it was just a really great expression of neighborhood welcoming and connectivity. So just wanted to shout out to the neighborhoods team for their support of those sorts of street events. We really appreciate them.
Just a quick comment, but that we're back after 2 months of the summer. Not that anyone really not to give the impression that we all took the time off or anything, but there were so many amazing community events put on by so many amazing volunteers that filled the square, filled other parts of Waterloo with activity, from neighborhood parties like similar to what Councillor Wright just described across the city to, the Busker Fest and the Jazz Festival and things that the BIA put on, and night markets and art markets, and I know there was just so much happening in the city that kept it really vibrant and active. And I heard from so many people that they really appreciated the opportunities to have a lot of free summer events, movies in the park, salsa in the square, things like that our arts and culture team activated for the community. So lots and lots that happened this summer, and just wanted to say thanks to all the staff who organized those and got them ready, because it takes transportation and bylaw and arts and culture and probably others that parks, everything to contribute to it. And then just a big thanks to all the volunteers who contribute and make it a really vibrant summer and place to live. So thank you.
It's a very good summary, Mayor McCabe. Councillor Rowe.
Oh, yes, thank you, through you, Chair. I just wanted to add that Waterloo Fest was uptown, I don't even remember what day, but anyway, last Wednesday, yes. Fantastic. The turnout was amazing. The entertainment, the kids were dancing. It was really great. So well done to staff for organizing that.
Councillor Roach.
This weekend, we have the Emergency Services Career Camp at the Emergency Training Center on Herbs Road, and we have an amazing group. I was part of the selection process. We have an amazing, diverse group of young people that will be attending this camp, so I'm really excited to attend the orientation tomorrow and the camp this weekend.
Great, thanks, Councillor Roach. Anyone else? Anyone from the west side of the city have anything going on there? No, nothing going on. Okay, well, to the neighborhoods team, a big thank you, and especially for extending the mini grant funding to help activities go every year, so there doesn't have to be something new every year, which has meant that Cardinal Crescent neighbors have had their ice cream social for about 4 years now, and it keeps getting better and better attended. And then at the beginning of the summer, there was a Rosalie Park Summer in the Park where they had freezies and lots of fun games that the neighborhoods team puts on, but then they also had this rocket making and shooting contest with pop bottles, and they had gift cards for stores uptown too. So anyways, lots of great things happening in the neighborhood, but those were a couple that were supported and enabled by city staff, so thanks. Okay, great. Enactment of bylaws. Councillor Wright, Councillor Bodley. All in favor? It's everybody. Okay, who wants to adjourn? Councillor Rowe? Anyone else want to go? Councillor Bodley? Great. See you guys next week. Oh, sorry, all in favor. Ugh, I almost did it all.